again, a role model that is still a work in the making is the Parliament of Europe, which started off like the UN with its representatives being appointed by each country, but then they went to direct elections. So again, for those who say, oh, this is never going to happen, well, 27 countries in Europe are doing it right now, and that that number of countries is probably going to go up to at least 50 something in the next few years. So yes, it's doable. Once you and I feel that we have had a hand in electing the people who serve on this world legislature, we then have more trust in them when they need to be able to legislate, in other words, make laws on some limited, narrow range of things, like global warming, use of force. So here comes the question of who's going to decide who's the crazy country. The second thing is we need to have pre-decided amongst all of us, so all the nations need to come to some agreement on what are the rules and what are the consequences. When you were kids at home, your parents told you, if you kick someone or you spit at someone, you are going to have certain consequences. And a good parent, a psychologist will tell you, tells you in advance, if you kick someone, I am going to remove your privileges to, I don't know, watch movies or play with your friends. You tell the kid ahead of time. It's the same with the international community. All the nations have to agree, A, on the principles, then applying those principles based on their values, decide what the rules are going to be. So for example, let's take the example right now with all these countries that are posing a danger of nuclear proliferation. The world by now should have had a system to say, what happens if a country starts creating nuclear arms illegally and threatens the peace of the world? See, after the Iraq War, we got so used to finger pointing. Oh, who lied? Who told the truth? Did this happen? We forgot the bigger question. The bigger question was, well, what if you have actual evidence that a country is planning to launch nuclear missiles and destroy the peace of the world? Then what does the world collectively do? And we need to know what the consequences are ahead of time. Then the people at the UN and the Security Council, again, a revamped Security Council, not the Security Council as it is now with veto power and all that, will get to apply the principles. They say, did this, and this happen according to the rules we agreed on? Yes, they violated this rule, they violated that rule, they violated the other rule, and therefore now the consequence follows, including use of force. And the last point, by the way, each of these is a whole book or a chapter in a book, but the last thing you need is an enforcement mechanism, a collective enforcement mechanism. You can't have individuals going in correcting the situation. You can't have coalitions of nations going in, because you never know what their real agenda is. And we see the backlash we've had when we, the United States of America, have participated in coalitions. People say, oh, you want to be the policeman of the world. You want to do this because you want oil. Oh, you're doing this because you hate our religion. There are all kinds of malintents that are attributed to the governments who are trying to bring some sort of stability. So that model doesn't work. What we need to have, again, is a collective international standing force that has soldiers from every single country of the world, that is not under the control of any particular nation, but it is under the control of the elected representatives of all the peoples of the world. That really is the only solution that I see. I don't want to take up more time. If you're interested in learning more, you know, all of these questions are addressed in my book, Collective Security Within Reach. You can just go on Amazon.com and just take a look. I think some of this stuff is even available free. You can just, you know, look it up and take a read if you're interested, and look at the blog, because all of these use of force issues are actually covered in the blog. We wouldn't dream of setting criminal laws saying if you murder someone, you voluntarily come, you own up to it, and then you figure out your own punishment. You need weapons to maintain law and order internally, you need a police force, you need punishment, and you need prisons. Otherwise the system doesn't work. It's crazy to have an international global order in which we have laws but no way of enforcing them, in which we don't have a standing army. If you know that a government of the world is about to destroy the peace of the world, you absolutely have to send in force to put that down. Lastly, once they know that an international force exists, I think 90% of these problems will be eliminated. The reason we have most of these problems is because they know, they can do whatever they want with impunity, and who's going to do anything about it? The US now is stretched to the gills with its military and trying to pull back forces, and nobody else is going to step in. So you can get away with anything you want to.
I think every time when you're faced with a challenging situation where you have divergence of views and conflicting opinions, the first step is you have to find a bridge to some level of unity, of identity. Now that may mean the first thing you have to do, as I mentioned earlier, we spend most of our political discourse today disputing facts. We don't even agree on facts. So it's impossible to start a process of discourse to resolve problems if you don't have a consensus around basic factual information. So in my experience, this isn't hypothetical, as I was saying, in what we did in a couple of places, we used external entities to survey or to gather information where it was clear they had no ulterior motive. The people participated in the process. Let me give you another example that's a little more specific. I was a mediator on a conflict with the biggest gold mine in Latin America. And it was in the Andes at 15,000 feet. The Indian and campesino population that surrounded the mine believed deeply that the mine was contaminating their water. There was no human way to explain to them that that was not happening. So what we did, we spent $600,000 doing a water test all 4 seasons of the year, because you have to do water tests during the different seasons for the rainfall. And what we did is we call them veedores. These were observers. So we trained the local people, they're not scientists, but every time the scientists went to the water to extract a sample, they were accompanied by local people who gave testimony that on the 5th of April X year, I saw so-and-so test the water, and then a few days, well actually a couple of weeks later, a test came back. So the whole process was invested in creating and giving people the same information that everybody else had. And then on the basis of that, they could assure their neighbors, their colleagues, and so forth. They gave faith that this, yes, occurred. Well, this took time. This isn't something that's simple to do. But, and it turned out to be quite effective, and in fact there were residuals of mercury and other contaminants in the water. They weren't unhealthy at this point. The mine had to recognize that. They had to build new ways of dealing with that, and subsequently did. So the point being is you have to take, when you have a dispute about basic information, you have to find a way to create a different and independent source, and then around that source, begin a consultative process and look for unity, look for agreement. When I teach mediation, I start by saying we're going to weave a carpet. We just don't know what the design is. So every agreement is a knot in a carpet. Anybody knows anything about a carpet? Every knot has to be as strong as the other knot. So, and no knot is more important than the other knot. So when you do these things, you start by looking at the simplest things and you build points of understanding, and that builds trust. And incrementally you build enough trust that people can have discourse and work through differences.
Any generation, this generation or the next generation, they are going to resolve all these issues first and foremost through knowledge. We cannot be indifferent to the realities we're facing. And if we are indifferent, it is probably because we don't know. In other words, it is really amazing to me when we discuss some of these topics, and of course a lot of these are very abstract relationships that this is not tangible. These are things that we have to start thinking about. So it does require us, spending time and reflecting and having a discourse. So basically, the way we can empower each other and the next generation is by increasing our knowledge. Economists are now beginning to recognize that the wealth of a nation is not only the natural resources. The wealth of a nation, more importantly, is the stock of knowledge that exists and how far and wide it's being disseminated in the world. Okay? So therefore, universal mandatory education is nowadays a common word, that we want to have education so that each one of us and our children become aware of how wealth is distributed. What are the implications of such a huge gap in distribution on consumption, on production, on taxation, on infrastructure, on technology, on trade, because these are all very intricately related to each other. And on top of that, all of these are related, as I mentioned, to governance, collective security, the role of UN. So basically, there are these three constituent parts. Individuals are the most powerful. So each one of us need to become aware. Then we have institutions. So we need to then demand this from our institutions, because ultimately, in the final analysis, those institutions are the ones whom we elect. So we need to make sure that our election processes are not a function of special interest and campaign contributions. That our elections are purely to elect individuals whose ultimate objective is for the generality of humankind, for that one family that my dear colleague Sobeda referred to, with pure motives, okay? Now, of course, we're not going to have saints who go up there, but at the same time, the process of liberal democracy is, if they are not performing that function, if they're not servants of their community as they should be, then they need to be de-elected and somebody else elected. And finally, we need to build communities. We need to become part of communities and build communities that are aware of what happens in our own community. So I cannot be indifferent or uninvolved in, let's say, the education, the provision of education in my community. I cannot be indifferent to see the school district that is in my hometown. Is it diversified, or is it mainly the elites? Is it, underprivileged students, gang students, drug problems? So that's just only one aspect. How about the environment in my city? How about the way the city hall is collecting, let's say, property taxes and spending it on the public? So all of these, of course, become part of involvement in the community. So in a nutshell, this is how we need to be. Frankly, I'm not exactly sure if it is only a matter of giving out our iPods, and I wish it was that easy. No. Again, we want to move towards a needs-based economy. We have certain needs, and of course that's an entire chapter in and of itself, and a discussion as to, is our consumption motivated by our basic needs or by unlimited wants? Okay, so unfortunately, the culture we live in encourages consumerism, meaning shop until you drop. The other day I saw a bumper sticker that says, "I was born to shop." So that is what we need to stop. That mentality that our purpose in life is to shop. What's wrong with an iPod here, an iPhone there, and technology? Those are wonderful facilitators for our communication. But the question is, if my life is only summarized in my iPod, and I'm going to wait 48 hours in the queue to go to the Apple store to buy one, and I'm going to, pretty much sacrifice everything. I think that's the readjustment that we need to give to our mental state to be able to change that. So that's one aspect. But frankly, it is not only a matter of legislation to sacrifice, to have maybe the 1% sacrifice X% of their wealth and redistribute it to others. That would be wonderful. In fact, if I could convince a fraction of the 10% to give 1% of that 10% to me, then I'll give it all to you. Or to Habib, maybe for this foundation. The issue is more serious than that. The issue is institutional arrangements. The issue is how can we, again, have our institutions come up with a fundamental change in the game, change in rules of the game, so that we don't even have that to begin with. The reason, for example, why we have these problems, and in fact I have one question here which was addressed to me as to what about production? You know, we're talking about the distribution. What led to this process? Why don't I talk about the creative process, the process of creating wealth? Well, of course, you know, the purpose of an economic system is to create wealth and to create output. The issue is the more concentrated the wealth is, the less production, the less creation is going to occur. Why is that? Because in economics we have this circular flow of goods and services. Why do business people go to produce goods and services? Because I demand them. Well, why do I demand them? Because I have money, I have income to buy them. What if I don't have income? If I don't have income, then I cannot demand goods and services. When I don't demand goods and services, the producers cannot produce it. So why would I have income? In the last, from the same period that I mentioned, the growth of the share of the income gain, national income gain, by the wealthiest 1% has been 65% of the national income. This is in 2007. In 2010, that share of the gain in national income has become 93%. That means more of what is being produced is being concentrated on the top, in the top 1%. So that means the more is concentrated up there, the less income the people get. The less income they get, the less they consume. The less they consume, that means the less they demand. The less they demand, the less production is made. So as you can see, if the wealth is more evenly distributed, not completely, then more production is going to occur. I mean, I have the ability to demand more. When I have the ability to demand more, there's more production, and therefore, more production means more jobs. So that creates employment. That brings us out of poverty. On the other hand, if the wealth becomes more concentrated, what are those folks going to do with their wealth? Obviously, they're going to invest it. Okay? They're not going to consume hundreds of billions of dollars. They're going to invest it. Where are they going to invest it? Are they going to invest it in countries like the United States where labor is more expensive, or are they going to invest it where labor is cheap? Now you see where I'm going at. You know, there's going to invest it where labor is cheap. So that means it's going to create more unemployment, less production is going to even happen. That's why you see what we call this outsourcing, which means wealth is leaving the country. It's called capital flight. Wealth is leaving the country, going to countries like China, Indonesia, Latin America, and we're creating jobs for others. Now, I say that with caution because for me there is no us and others. We're all part of one family. Nonetheless, even based on the current structure, that is untenable. That's why we have labor strikes. We have unions going crazy about, we are losing our jobs here. So all of these are very much intricately.
So it's interesting because even when Sheryl Sandberg just recently wrote a book, and she's gotten a lot of, I mean, the conversation nationwide has been very didactic in the sense that some people say, well, she's saying go ahead, be very ambitious, try for the highest leadership positions both in politics and in government and, you know, at work. And you can strive to have a very vital and vibrant family life, just lean in. Don't get out of the race before it's done. And a lot of women have countered that by saying that that's not possible. But when you start looking at research for like elected officials, they ask women, what made you want to run for office? And most women say, because I was asked. So, the problem also lays in some of the ways us women think about leadership. That you wait to be asked, while other people would say, I decided because this is very important to me, and I'm going to take a chance, and that's leaning in. That not waiting to have someone back you and ask for you to join in. So it's not about a quota system, it's actually a different way of perceiving yourself to begin with. Really, that becomes essential. If you do research on women and entrepreneurship has become the biggest segment of growth for women. You ask them in regards to promotion or doing their next big dream. And what is the first thing that comes to mind when they want to get promoted? They just say, I don't think I know enough to do this job. Whereas many of their male counterparts, they say, I learn as I go along. You know, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'll take the step and I have faith that I'm going to figure this out. But many women fall into the trap of saying, I need to really know everything before I do that. There is no such thing. So perhaps that answers part of the question.
Yes, okay, so we want women to want to do it just because you go for more positions in the government and high caliber. So how do we overcome the cultural barrier that most women are raised, even when they go for higher education, they're mostly raised to think that someday I'm going to have to take care of a family and not career would be their first choice. So how do we change that cultural atmosphere?
Well, but I do think that the cultural atmosphere has changed so much from 30 years ago. When you look at college-educated women, we have more graduate-level women going forth. I think that we need to really reconstitute what we deem as success in life. And I'm not per se, and I have written articles about this, is that being a CEO of a company and having that as your only life mission, you would have missed a lot of things in your life. And each person has a calling. And, you know, a lot of the women that I wrote about in my book, or I talk about, may not have had the vibrant family lives, but that was the choice they made. You know, each person comes to this world with a specific calling. For one person, success means having a little bit of everything. And for another person, it could be that they really want to be change makers. And being a change maker means that you have to give an inordinate amount of resources, both emotional and psychological, to what you deem to be that place of priority for you. So who is to say what's the right way or not the right way? And oftentimes economic situations really dictate the way you enter the workforce or leave the workforce. So I would be so remiss that women are blamed for doing something or not doing something.
Excellent. Thank you.
All the answers to the world's problems, including revamping the UN, are going to start at the grassroots. So the thing you can do is when you leave this room, start thinking about identifying the principles upon which our world, including the UN, is to operate, and start discussing it with your friends. You just want to get yourselves and others to think. Once we have an educated electorate, we will be electing the right kind of people to our governments, will come from the right motivation and provide the kinds of solution the world needs. So that's all you need to do, is talk about these issues, think about these issues, be creative, be imaginative, however wild the idea sounds, go for it, and work in teams. That's what I'd say.
You know, every step starts by looking in the mirror and assessing who you are as a human being. I read a quote from the Baha'i writings earlier that we're all created noble. I'm not sure many of us have ever heard that before. I told you in Latin America where we had done that, no one had ever heard that. No one believed it. If you understand your essential purpose in life is to discover that inner nobility and give expression to that inner nobility in whatever path you choose, the doors will open for paths of service that are unimaginable to you. But you have to believe in yourself. You have to take cognizance of who you are and what your purposes are. If your purposes are acquisitive, just to gather things, or if your purposes are to be of service to other people, doors open. The needs for services are everywhere. They can be found in every way. Every day, people have a chance to be of service in some very profound and meaningful way. It may not be systemic, but if it's interpersonal, it's one human relating to another, then I think it's cultivating a heart that is a receptacle and a giver of love. And in so doing, what you will find is that you are part of a very large family, all of whom are seeking love and support. So my question is, have you looked in the mirror recently?
I also firmly believe in this concept of nobility of man, and men and women, humankind. And part of that nobility is the power to choose, because that's really what forms our identity of being human. And frankly, the first lesson in economics is all about choices and choosing from various alternatives to achieve certain ends. So I also believe, and economics also believes, that consumers are kings. In other words, the decisions that consumers make are what basically change economies. And when we get out of this door, we have choices to make. And the choices that we make is, okay, what am I going to consume? Why I'm going to consume? What kind of a job am I going to choose? Why am I going to choose this job? If I want to hire people to work for me, what kind of people do I want to hire? For what purpose? So all of these are choices that we make. And I can assure you, and I can in fact demonstrate this in time, that every one of these choices are ultimately going to lead to how we make money and how that money is accumulated or distributed. So these choices are not interrelated, are very much interrelated, but they're not unrelated to each other. Just one example. Question is, when I leave this door, do I go to buy a Hummer, which of course doesn't exist anymore, or do I go and buy a hybrid fuel-efficient car? And if you think that decision does not have implication on global warming, on the way we consume oil, and on how oil is distributed in the world from these countries, which could cause all kinds of political conflict, and how that does not impact basically corporations getting wealthy and becoming part of that 1%, we're mistaken. We can make these choices, but we have to make choices with consciousness and with very clear, well-defined objectives that we have to make. So, with this notion of our nobility, the exercise of the power to choose, plus the objective that was mentioned again in the beginning of this session, for us to be able to serve each other and help each other, that's when we're going to begin to make it.
I do think that if we were to, when you look at the most effective people, and it's not just about women, most effective people, the way they look at themselves is that they truly look at their strengths. That if I'm consulting my best friend Carl Young, we all have We have shadow aspects to ourselves, our weaknesses, our dark side, and our light side. We should be very well aware of our weaknesses, but the most successful people always know what their strengths are, and they tailor their life based on those strengths. They have relationships that nurture them, so that's important. I always say that, who do you have on your board of directors? You're a company yourself. Who do you choose to have on your board of directors? And that is going to take you far. Who's there to support your vision? Who's there to encourage you? And to give you feedback, even if it's positive or negative, that serves your growth. And really looking at how can you contribute in a way that's meaningful, that is based on your passion and your strength.